How's it, guys? Today we're going to set up an access point. It's a slightly used access point that we've got today, and it's an Avaya access point, but they still do work. And yeah, we're going to set it up for home use. There's a few things that we'll need. The first thing that we need is a power over Ethernet injector. If you've got a power over Ethernet switch, then you won't need an injector. Okay, you'll need a little paper clip which we'll use to reset the access point, and obviously your router which your access point will connect to. So I'll show you today how we do this from scratch. So the first thing we need to do is we need to power the injector up and plug in a cord. If you can see where it says PoE, right? Generally there's two ports for an injector. The LAN portion goes to the router, and the PoE would go to the device that needs power and connectivity. For this section, we're going to reset the access point to its factory defaults. So I've placed the little paper clip into the reset button, and there are two ports on this specific access point. The cable needs to go into the one that's labeled gigabit 1/PoE plus. The moment you plug in the cable, the pin on the reset needs to be pressed in firmly. You'll feel the click as soon as you press it in. If you don't feel the click, that means you're not pressing the button. You need to keep the button in for at least 15 to 20 seconds for it to reset. Thereafter, release the paper clip, and it takes approximately, I would give it 5 minutes for the access point to reset and reboot. I'm going to do that offline, and I'll show you the results afterwards. Okay, so while it's busy resetting, I'm going to connect up the other portion of the injector. So the one portion labeled PoE is going to the access point that's providing the power. The other portion is a cable that needs to run to your router. So I've plugged in a cable into my router, just a normal LAN port, and I'm plugging the other section into the injector. Okay, after I plug it in, we'll then log on to the router to try to identify the access point. So depending on your router, there's multiple different ways to identify which device is your access point. The easiest way to identify your access point is using the MAC address, which is essentially the first barcode on the top, ending in 2318 in this case. Every MAC address will be unique and every router will be different. But when you look at your DHCP client list on your router, which I'll show you a little bit later on, you will see that when you factory default a access point, it automatically picks up a DHCP address, and it will look for a DHCP address from your router. This specific router right now is not connected to the internet, it's standalone, but that's fine for the purpose of setting up an access point. Okay, so it's been a while since the access point is rebooted and been reset. Now we need to log into our router and try to configure it. Generally, you find this address as your default gateway, and you can just log into it. Alright, so I'm using a T-Link, which is quite easy to find the DHCP table. So all I do is I go to my statistics and my DHCP, and I can see this is my laptop. Because there's nothing else connected to this router as I previously indicated, this can be the only one that is my access point. If you refer back to the old videos, you would remember that the MAC addresses ended in 2318, and you can see that this is the same MAC address, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to copy this MAC address, and we could going to put in the browser. You need to do HTTPS and the MAC address, the IP address. Was it 31? Okay, as you can see, it's found it. Don't worry about this warning, I would call it. This is generally complaining because it's saying it doesn't know the certificate, but it's still fine. It's because it's a standalone certificate, also referred to as a self-signed certificate. Okay, so we'll proceed. And now you can see this indicates that we're on the access point. The first thing we need to do is log in with the default username and password, which is admin and admin. Okay, this is just a message that's saying it hasn't been configured before. Right? It brings you to the Express Setup tab here on the left hand side, where you can issue it a host name. If you want to set a static IP address, you could. Okay, and then it says SSID settings, and there is a default one called Avaya. In this case, I'm just going to call it home. Okay, at the moment you can see it's saying what settings. You go open WP, WPA2. I use WPA both, and I put the password of password. Please use something a little bit more genius than password. Okay. Right, so now you'd see they're saying SSID Home has been enabled. Click on the SSID menus for further configuration. You cannot enable keep NPSK. Global WPA support, change to off. That's fine. I'll show you what it is when we get there. Okay, now it's saying admin settings. The new admin user replaces admin. So if you want to replace the admin username, you can call it Bob. All right, and you could replace the password. Always change the password. So in this case, I'm using my genius password. Okay, then I apply the admin setting, and then it says new admin user is required to change password. Please enter the username. No, I'm not going to do that because this is implying that I need to add a username. So I won't do that for now. Because we're in South Africa, I need to make sure my time zone is appropriate. I'm in GMT +2, so I select that. Then I need to enable the radios because the radios are all disabled at uh, when you reset it. If you do not enable the radios, the AP will never broadcast your SSIDs. So I'm going to execute. Okay, perfect. Now what I want to do before I do anything else, I want to save the configuration. Let's go back to that admin password. The admin username and password is all here under security admin management. You can see there's the admin username. This is actually where you create a new password. Okay, done. Hit enter. It says successful update. Generally at this point in time, the best I see is to log out and then log in using the new username and password. Okay, now again it's saying configuration has not been saved, please save. So now we know everything that we've done to date now is correct. The other thing we needed to do is it complained about the SSIDs, right? So we did update it, the name to home. You can call it whatever you want to, right? As you can see, this is the name we chose. It's enabled. It's broadcasting. It's using both bands. If you want to create one for 2.4 gigahertz only, you'll select that here. I generally don't do that. I leave the VLAN standard. I leave the QoS standard. We're not setting up DHCP because we're using it on the router. Now here's where the challenge comes in. If you look here, there's no place for us to put in a password, right? So you have to untick global. Now you'll see you've got a few more options here. Your encryption ciphers needs to remain the same. And your authentication can't be EAP. You need to change it to PSK. That means pre-shared key. And here you put in your password. Again, I'm using our genius password. And you click the set button. Again, don't forget to click save. And that is basically the bare minimum that you would need to do to actually get this access point working. So if you've got 5 of these, you could set them up in the exact same manner. The only thing that you would need to do if you're setting up multiple access points, right, and express setup, you would probably want to give it a name that you would be able to identify the access point with, right? And you would probably want to put a static IP address versus a dynamic IP address. If you're going to go with a dynamic IP address, a DHCP address, it will change every so often. And to sort of track it down, you'd have to log on to the router. If you keep it static, you could save it as a bookmark and you can always find it. So that's just a little tip. It's not really mandatory, but it just makes management a lot more easier. If you're going to go with static IP addressing, it's very important to note also that you will need to set a DNS server here, right? Generally, I just point the DNS server to my router. In this case, it's also a default gateway because it forwards on DNS requests to ISP. And it's basically as simple as it is. To verify that your radios were activated, click on the radios tab, go to radio setting, and you can see that the switch toggles enable all radios or disable all radios. The green is indicative that it is enabled. So if you'll go to your wireless settings now, you will see there's a home network. And that's all it is to setting up the access point. You can see at the bottom here, it gives you a little log of everything that you've done. Before I leave, I always like to make sure it's saved. You can see it's saving there. And I log out. Re-verify the login credentials. And that's the end of the story. Thank you for watching my video. If there is any questions, please pop it into the comments. Thank you.